The revolutionary discovery that destroyed everything we thought we knew about being a man. What if everything you've been taught about masculinity is not just wrong, but psychologically dangerous? In 1955, Carl Jung made a discovery so shocking about conscious masculinity that he hesitated to publish it, knowing it would fundamentally challenge every assumption society held about what it means to be a strong man. This wasn't just another theory about gender roles, it was a revolutionary insight that explained why so many successful, accomplished men felt secretly empty, why traditional masculine advice often backfired, and why the very qualities society celebrated as peak masculinity were actually symptoms of psychological unconsciousness that kept men trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction and emotional numbness. Jung's shocking revelation began with a simple but devastating observation. The men who appeared most masculine according to social standards were often the most disconnected from their authentic masculine essence. The corporate executives who dominated boardrooms, the athletes who conquered physical challenges, the leaders who commanded respect, many of these seemingly successful men were living what Jung called unconscious masculinity, a psychological state where they had become so identified with external performance that they had lost contact with the deeper sources of masculine power and vitality that could actually fulfill them. This discovery emerged from Jung's decades of working with highly successful men who came to therapy despite having achieved everything society told them would make them happy. These weren't weak or unsuccessful individuals. They were accomplished professionals, respected leaders, and devoted fathers who nonetheless felt a gnawing sense that something essential was missing from their lives. They described feeling like actors playing roles, successful in their performances, but disconnected from any sense of authentic purpose or deep satisfaction. Have you ever achieved something you worked toward for years, only to find that the success felt hollow and left you wondering if there was something fundamentally wrong with how you approach life? Jung realized that what society called masculine strength was often psychological compensation. Men were performing strength because they felt weak, demonstrating control because they felt powerless, and pursuing dominance because they felt insignificant. This compensatory masculinity created a vicious cycle where men became increasingly disconnected from their authentic feelings, intuitions, and creative impulses in order to maintain an image of strength that was actually built on a foundation of unconscious fear and inadequacy. The shocking truth Jung discovered was that conscious masculinity required the opposite of what most men had been taught. Instead of suppressing vulnerability, conscious masculine development demanded embracing it as a source of strength. Instead of avoiding emotional complexity, it required developing sophisticated emotional intelligence. Instead of maintaining rigid control, it demanded learning to flow with uncertainty, while remaining grounded in authentic values and purpose. Jung's analysis revealed that unconscious masculinity was characterized by what he called identification with the persona. Men became so merged with their social roles and external achievements that they lost touch with their inner psychological reality. The successful businessman became nothing more than his business success. The strong father became nothing more than his protective function. The rational leader became nothing more than his decision-making capacity. This identification created psychological rigidity that prevented growth, adaptability, and genuine relationship with others. Conscious masculinity, according to Jung's revolutionary understanding, required men to develop what he called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold paradox and integrate seemingly opposite qualities within their personality. A consciously masculine man could be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected, both rational and intuitive, both protective and receptive. This integration created psychological flexibility and authentic power that unconscious masculinity could never achieve. The shocking implications of Jung's discovery extended beyond individual psychology into relationships and society. Men operating from unconscious masculinity often attracted partners who were unconsciously seeking a father figure or protector, creating relationships based on dependency rather than mutual growth. These relationships often stagnated because neither partner was relating to the other as a complete human being, but rather as a collection of functions designed to meet psychological needs that should have been addressed through individual development. Jung observed that conscious masculinity required men to develop what he called active imagination, the capacity to engage consciously with their unconscious psychological content through dreams, fantasies, creative expression, and emotional exploration. This was revolutionary because it suggested that psychological health for men required engaging with the very capacities that society often labeled as feminine or weak. Men needed to develop intuition, emotional sensitivity, creative expression, and receptivity not despite their masculinity, but as expressions of mature masculine development. Can you think of a time when you ignored your intuition or emotional response in favor of what seemed more rational or socially acceptable, only to realize later that your initial feeling was accurate and important? The practical application of Jung's insights about conscious masculinity often shocked men who had built their identity around traditional masculine performance. Developing consciousness required acknowledging that their drive for success might be motivated by inadequacy rather than authentic ambition. It meant recognizing that their emotional numbness wasn't strength, but defense. It demanded accepting that their need to be right or in control might be compensation for feelings of powerlessness or uncertainty they had never learned to tolerate. Jung's revolutionary approach to conscious masculinity also challenged the widespread belief that men naturally lacked emotional intelligence or capacity for psychological complexity. His clinical work demonstrated that men were equally capable of sophisticated emotional awareness and psychological insight, but that social conditioning had taught them to suppress and devalue these capacities. Conscious masculine development required reclaiming these natural abilities that had been sacrificed to meet external expectations of masculine performance. The shocking truth about conscious masculinity extended into men's relationships with other men. Jung observed that unconscious masculinity created competitive, hierarchical relationships where men related to each other primarily through comparison, dominance, and performance. Conscious masculinity opened the possibility for authentic friendship, mutual support, and collaborative growth that was based on genuine appreciation rather than competitive assessment. This shift often felt revolutionary to men who had spent their lives relating to other men as competitors or threats. Jung's analysis revealed that conscious masculinity required developing what he called the wounded healer archetype, the recognition that authentic strength came not from avoiding psychological pain, but from consciously engaging with and integrating difficult experiences. Men who had developed this quality could offer genuine support to others because they had learned to face their own struggles with courage and honesty rather than denial or compensation. The shocking implications of Jung's discoveries about conscious masculinity also extended into parenting and mentorship. Men operating from unconscious masculinity often tried to raise children, especially sons, to avoid the psychological pain and vulnerability that they themselves had never learned to navigate. This created generational cycles where each generation taught the next to suppress authentic feeling and intuition in favor of external performance and control. Conscious masculine fathers and mentors, according to Jung's insights, could model emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and authentic strength for younger generations. They could demonstrate that real masculine power came from self-awareness, emotional regulation, creative expression, and the capacity for genuine intimacy rather than from dominance, control, or emotional numbness. This modeling created possibilities for healthier masculine development that broke generational patterns of unconscious compensation. Have you noticed how the men you most respect and admire tend to be those who can be strong and vulnerable, confident and humble, independent and caring at the same time? Jung's shocking revelation about conscious masculinity also addressed the spiritual dimension of masculine development. He observed that unconscious masculinity often created what he called spiritual aridity, a sense of meaninglessness and disconnection from purpose that no amount of external achievement could resolve. Conscious masculinity required developing what Jung called the religious function, not necessarily traditional religious belief, but a conscious relationship with meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than individual ego satisfaction. The practical development of conscious masculinity, according to Jung's insights, required specific practices and commitments that were often initially uncomfortable for men who had learned to avoid emotional complexity. These included dream work to develop relationship with unconscious content, active imagination to integrate suppressed aspects of personality, emotional exploration to develop feeling intelligence, and creative expression to access authentic sources of vitality and meaning. Jung understood that the transition from unconscious to conscious masculinity was often triggered by what he called the midlife crisis, not simply a desire for external change, but a psychological emergency created by the unconscious mind's rebellion against a life that had become too narrow and inauthentic. This crisis was actually an opportunity for conscious development, but it required understanding the difference between escaping into new external pursuits and engaging in the internal work of psychological integration. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to explore what conscious masculine development actually requires, beyond social expectations and performance. Like this video if you believe that authentic strength comes from self-awareness and emotional intelligence, rather than dominance and control. Share this content with someone who's ready to question conventional assumptions about masculinity and explore more authentic ways of being a man. The shocking truth that Jung revealed about conscious masculinity continues to challenge contemporary understanding of masculine development. His insights suggest that much of what passes for masculine strength in modern culture is actually psychological unconsciousness that prevents men from accessing their authentic power, creativity, and capacity for meaningful relationship. The qualities that create genuine masculine attractiveness, leadership ability, and personal satisfaction are often the opposite of what social conditioning teaches men to pursue. Jung's revolutionary understanding of conscious masculinity offers practical solutions for men who feel trapped by conventional masculine expectations but don't know how to develop authentic alternatives. His approach suggests that real masculine power comes from psychological integration, emotional intelligence, creative expression, and the courage to be authentic, even when that authenticity challenges social expectations or requires acknowledging uncertainty and vulnerability. The development of conscious masculinity, according to Jung's insights, benefits not only individual men but also their relationships, families, and communities. Men who have done the work of conscious development become capable of genuine leadership that serves others rather than defending ego, authentic intimacy that supports mutual growth, and creative contribution that expresses their unique gifts rather than compensating for unconscious inadequacy. Your own experience of feeling disconnected from conventional masculine advice, sensing that there's more to masculine identity than external achievement, or struggling with the gap between social expectations and authentic feeling, may indicate that you're ready for the kind of conscious masculine development that Jung described. Understanding the difference between compensatory performance and authentic strength can help you begin the challenging but ultimately liberating work of developing conscious masculinity. The ultimate insight from Jung's shocking discoveries about conscious masculinity is that the very qualities men are taught to suppress, emotional intelligence, vulnerability, intuition, creativity, and receptivity, are actually essential components of mature masculine development. Integrating these capacities doesn't make men less masculine, but reveals what authentic masculinity actually looks like when it's not built on unconscious compensation and social performance. Jung's revolutionary truth about conscious masculinity stands as both challenge and invitation. The masculinity that society celebrates is often psychological unconsciousness, but the conscious masculinity that creates genuine fulfillment, authentic relationships, and meaningful contribution requires the courage to question everything you've been taught about what it means to be a strong man and to develop capacities that our culture has mistakenly labeled as weakness, but that are actually sources of authentic masculine power.